Hello and greetings from UB. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement and the UB School of Management, we are delighted you are able to join us for today's webinar presentation. My name is Christy Fields and I manage the Alumni Lifelong Learning Program here at UB. I am also joined by my wonderful colleague Joy Rona, who will assist in monitoring any questions. We are both so grateful you are able to join us today and hope you and your family are staying well. It is my honor to welcome today's featured presenter, James Lemoyne, Assistant Professor of Organization and Human Resources and a researcher with the Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness at the University at Buffalo. His research focuses on leadership, ethics, and creativity, and has been published in the Harvard Business Review and Business Horizons, as well as prestigious academic journals like the Academy of Management Annals and Journal of Applied Psychology. His work also frequently appears in magazines such as Forbes Incorporated, Fast Company, and Entrepreneur. Jim serves as a member of the Board of Directors for the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership, an international organization dedicated to sharing and promoting the servant leadership philosophy. Prior to obtaining his PhD at Georgia Tech, he was an entrepreneur, consultant, and manager at companies such as AT&T. In today's webinar, Jim will lead a discussion of the research and logic underlying our moral and political beliefs, and how to effectively understand and communicate with people no matter how different their views may be. We will leave some time during today's webinar for Q&A. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them through the GoToWebinar taskbar. There's a questions section on your screen, and you can chat those to us at any time. In addition, we'll be recording today's session, and we will send you all a copy within the next 24 hours. So with that said, it's my pleasure to turn it over to our featured presenter, my colleague here at UB, Jim Lemoyne.
Okay, thank you. And here we go with a virtual speech. Thank you for having me. I apologize in advance if parts of what I'm about to go through seem a little awkward or weird. It's very strange giving a presentation without seeing any of your audience members, without getting any of that kind of virtual feedback or visual feedback rather. And then it's also weird on this GoTo when you see the mirror image. Well, you don't understand, but basically I see, forget I said that. Welcome, thank you for attending. And it's great to see that so many of you decided to show up for this conversation on how to discuss your differences with others. Let me say a couple of things right off the bat. There might be three expectations that you might have that I want to tamp down a little bit before we get started. If you are like what I would expect a typical West New York Buffalo audience to be for a session like this, there are probably some of you out there who are looking forward to me telling you a little bit about how to persuade people how wonderful President Donald Trump is. You're probably thinking that's got to be the way he's going, and I'm going to let you down gently. I'm not going to go there. Now, there's probably also a lot of you who are thinking, especially given the university bent of this event, there might be more of you who are thinking, well, I'm really looking forward to Jim telling us how I can convince people how terrible President Trump is. And I'm going to let you down on that one too. If I'm going to be honest with you today, I'm going to be an equal opportunity offender. And then finally, if there are any of you out there who are familiar with my presentations, you might be thinking to yourself, actually someone said to me in the hall earlier today, oh, we get to see a lot of political jokes in this one. And let me just be honest with everybody here right up front. I'm not a fan of political jokes. I don't like them. They keep getting elected. So I really try not to go there. And see, like, I have no idea if you just laughed at that. That's like my best line, and I've got no clue if you liked it or not. So today, rather than taking one bench or the other, I don't care which end of the political spectrum you're on. That's not important to me. I'm not going to tell you which end of the political spectrum I'm on. We're just going to talk about how can you talk to people. And the first question that pops to mind, that I would pop to my mind if I were you, if I was in the audience for this, would be something along the lines of why do we even need to talk about this? I mean, do we have to talk about this? One way to look at this would be, I mean, obviously I'm right, and obviously they're wrong. So I mean, they should be here and not me. It's very big of me to come to this webinar when I'm the right one. It should be the other people. They're the ones who need to listen to me, right? So you could be thinking that way. And you could also be thinking that, maybe I don't even want to do this. I mean, if you're anything like me, this is kind of my take on political conversations with friends and family and at work. I'm not a big fan. I told you about that. But if you're here, it's probably because you either want to talk about this stuff, or maybe you feel forced to talk about this stuff. Maybe you're thinking about Thanksgiving coming up. Maybe you've got a way that you can do it where everybody feels safe and healthy, and you're anticipating this. Maybe you're thinking about next week and how, people are really using the term civil war, which is terrifying, which is frightening, which I sincerely hope is over the top. And if it is, it's not very responsible of people to use that terminology. But these are strange times. These are where 2020 sucks. It really does. So let's talk about this. The funny thing is that we all think we're right, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this. We all know somebody, and more likely than not, ourselves, we fall into this trap as well. We all think we've got all the answers. We all think we're right. This is a psychological bias we all have that I'll talk about a little bit later. But if we're in two opposite ends of the spectrum, obviously we both can't be right. So if we want to talk about this, well, this can be an issue. And it can be an issue both at work and in our professional lives. At work, this is kind of a graph from the research that's one of our major findings about conflict. And we find basically that conflict related to tasks, and at work, I'm talking about like what you do at work, it can be a good thing up to a certain level. But at high level, it turns into relationship conflict, and that's more like your mama is so fat kind of thing. And that's where political stuff usually goes. And that's always bad for your well-being, for your job satisfaction, for your performance, for your happiness. So it's bad for the organization, it's bad for you. And then of course, it can become an issue in your personal life, especially if there's someone close to you who you politically disagree with, if you're on opposite ends of the spectrum, whether it be a significant other, a child, a parent, another family member, a close friend and colleague, anything like that. Because it can make us really rethink. And this is something I found on Facebook. And actually, it's why I pulled myself off of Facebook and social media about 6 months ago. And you know what? My life is getting along just fine since then, although I do miss the baby pictures. We don't like people on the other side. When we find out that someone doesn't think exactly the same way we do, we tend to judge them a lot more poorly. For instance, here's a survey from the Pew Research Center that came out not too long ago that I found incredibly depressing. Basically saying, what do Republicans think of Democrats and what do Democrats think of Republicans? As you can see from this, we tend to think that people on the other side of the aisle are more closed-minded, that they're stupid, that they're evil, that they're lazy, that they're unpatriotic. And really, there's not a lot of research backing for most of this. I'll tell you that the one thing that there is some research backing here for, and these are weak relationships I'm about to tell you, it is true that Democrats and Republicans tend to have different personalities. It's not a one-to-one relationship. It's more like a 15–20% chance that they'll have these different personalities. And again, I'm going to be an equal opportunity offender here. The research says that Democrats, the more you lean towards the Democratic Party, you do tend to be a little more open-minded, and the more you tend towards the Republican side, you do actually tend to be a little more responsible. But it's not a lot. They're not huge differences, and there's certainly nothing beating each other up over, but we do it anyway. And this is an issue now more than ever, mostly because of our hyper-partisan society. This is one of my favorite pictures kind of illustrating the hyper-partisan society. It's a rough time to be involved in politics, to read the news, to be on social media. A lot of us have decided actually to stop voting because we think it'll be great not to feel responsible for what's going on in Washington. And people say, well, there've always been partisanship, and that's true. But I think most people would agree, and there's some research showing that the acrimony has grown. And some people say it started with Trump. Some people actually say it started with Obama. Some people say it started with the Tea Party movement. Some people say it started with the Iraq War. I personally, and this is just my gut, I think it kind of started during the Clinton impeachment. You could pick some different times, however you want, but it's a really hyper-partisan atmosphere, and it's destroying our personal relationships, and it's destroying, as the last slide showed, how we judge each other. And there are reasons for this. We don't say, I mean, when was the last time you said something like one of these quotes on the slide that I hope you're seeing right now? How do you feel about this? Well, I don't have enough information to make an informed opinion about that. Or I'm still thinking it through. I'm considering different perspectives. What's yours? You know, I think of conversations I had with people a long time ago, and I could hear that answer every now and then. I can remember giving that answer a few times. Nowadays, you don't hear it so much, and especially not on social media, where unfortunately we tend to have a lot of our political conversations. It seems like the rule of modern society is that if there's anything political or moral out there, you have to either immediately click the like button, or you have to get angry about it and type a really long reply about how stupid and evil these people are. And we have a general tendency, by the way, to impression manage. We all have a little bit of narcissism baked within us, and that starts us down this path, and then social media exacerbates it. Here's something that I said in an interview recently for the Buffalo News, and that actually really concerns me about COVID. There's a lot of research that shows that virtual communications, even virtual Zoom meetings or webinars like this, they're not as good as real face-to-face communication. And thinking about this from the moral political perspective with social media, if we can't see the person, if we can't talk to them right in front of us that we're talking to, debating with, we are going to have lower relationship quality with them. We're going to have vaguer communication. We're going to misunderstand what they mean, and we're much more likely to be offensive and to say very rude things that we never would say if we're in person. This is something to think about for virtual meetings here in the COVID area. They just, so far at least, the research shows they can't match the level of relationship quality that we would have face-to-face, health benefits notwithstanding. But we never say, back to the point I was just making, we never say, you know, I don't know. And the reason for that is, well, that's just not what people do, right? And I'm a leader, as Christy said, I studied leadership. I'm a leadership researcher, right? So if you Google great leader and you ask for pictures of great leaders, you know, these are people we really admire. What I'm putting up are 8 of the first pictures that come up. And you can see we've got people from different backgrounds, different countries, even different political persuasions, different walks of life. A great business person in Oprah, great political leaders like most of them, and great faith leaders like Mother Teresa or Gandhi. How many of these can you imagine responding to a question about an important political or moral issue with, I don't know, I've got to think about that some more? Not many of them, right? You think to yourself, when you think of these people, you know, that you think they're forceful, they've got all the answers, they know it, and they're going to push for it, and they're going to put everything they've got behind it, and they're cool. These are people we kind of aspire to be, right? So we want to be like that. We don't want to be wishy-washy. We want to take a stand and be able to push forward and know that it's the moral right thing. And here's some other people, you know, just doing some research that people aspire to be like, you know, role models, folks like Malala, Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand, Condoleezza Rice, Barack Obama. Can you imagine these people saying, I don't have enough information to have an informed opinion of this? Of course not. In today's day and age, that could actually be seen as a sign of weakness. Consciously or subconsciously, we think that way. When we think of great people we want to be like, we think of them as being confident and firm, knowing, having these moral positions, and they don't back down. And that is not conducive. I mean, that's great for the hero image, the charismatic image, but it's really not conducive to having discussions where you're able to listen to each other, where you're able to maybe even persuade one another, or at the very least, where you're able to respect one another. So I'd like to just try to get a little bit of interactivity, and I want you to be honest with me with the question I'm about to ask you, and type some answers in the chat if you don't mind. No judgment here. Oh, I forgot, I was going to say, you know, even when I think of my childhood, one of my childhood heroes was Captain America. I used to love to read the comic books, and you know, he didn't say I don't know. He said, nope, truth, justice, the American way. Or was that Superman? I don't know. You know what I'm getting at. Anyway, about to ask you a question. I'd like you to type the answers in the chat. And just the first thing that comes to mind. Someone disagreed with you about a political or moral issue. Why was that? I mean, what's the first thing that pops to mind? If you say, I'm on this side, and someone says, I'm on the other side. I believe this, they say I believe that, or I don't believe that. What's just the first reason that comes to mind? Why did they disagree with you? If you wouldn't mind, and be honest, there's no judgment here. Could you type into the chat really quick so we can get kind of a feel for the group, what kind of answers we are. If you know, maybe this comes up at the Thanksgiving dinner we talked about before. Maybe it was a surprise that came up with your significant other. Maybe it was someone at work who you really respect who said, no, I disagree. I'm in the other party. What is the first reason that people come up with? And if you can't tell, I'm killing time right now because nobody's typed anything in the chat, which means there's a great opportunity for you to be the first. I know we've got about 60 people on here. Okay, well, maybe everybody's keyboards aren't working, or maybe GoToMeeting isn't working because I don't see anything in the chat. So I'll just say a few.
Dan, this is Christy. We have some, messages coming through the chat, so I'm going to read them. They're actually coming through fast and furious, so let me read a few of those to you.
Please do, because my chat shows absolutely blank. How strange.
Okay, here we go. So a few say someone might not be educated on a certain topic. We've seen a couple of those. Data, insecure. We also see, would they believe that way? I'll read a couple of more here. They are saying what they hear from people they respect. They are wrong. What makes you feel that way? Different experiences and values, lack of compromise, a lot of education.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you very much. And I apologize for not believing in you guys. My chat window is completely blank. That's very weird. So it's good to hear that you're playing it. And yeah, that's the things we think, right? When I think that way, I'll be honest with you, my first answer, my gut answer to that is they don't know what they're talking about. That's the first thing, and that kind of gets back to what you guys said a little more politically correctly with the education angle, right? The most likely things for us to think, according to research, are, well, they're just wrong. Their heart is not in the right place. They don't know what they're talking about. They're evil. They're just out for themselves. They're bigoted. There's a lot of different attributions we can make there. But the one thing that nobody said, and the one thing that I very rarely would say, it's always maybe they're wrong, or it's they're wrong. Nobody said maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're right and I'm wrong. Gosh, I respect these people. I know them. They may have had different perspectives. Our mind doesn't go there. And this is, you may be thinking, well, he still hasn't told me how to talk to people who disagree with me. Well, this might be the first step, is acknowledging, if you really want to talk to the people who disagree with you, you're hoping to change their mind probably. I'm getting ahead of myself, but you kind of need to be open to that too. Is it possible that you've missed something? And that experiment we just did, I didn't think to myself, well, maybe I'm wrong. You didn't think to yourself, maybe I'm wrong. That blocks these kinds of conversations we're about to talk about. If what you just said was anything negative, like mine was negative, then you're the victim of what we call an attribution bias. And how it works is this: we're psychologically primed to believe that we're right. We're the center of our universes, right? There's all these articles coming up now about how maybe the whole world is just one person plugged into a virtual experience like the Matrix, and everybody else, or if you've seen the Truman Show, where you literally are the center of your world. That's kind of the way our subconsciouses think. We're psychologically primed to believe we're right, and thus anyone who disagrees with us is either wrong or they're out for the wrong purposes. They're not looking for the right things that they should be, the good. You have this mindset. It's either conscious or subconscious, but you have this somewhere in your head. I have this mindset. I'm not judging. We've all got it. And your opponent does too. That's what makes it really hard, especially in the modern day and age, for us to talk to each other. You can't work together to find the right answer until at least one of you breaks out of this pattern. And it's not easy for either one of you, but one of you has to start there. And guess what? If you're in this webinar, my hope is that it's going to be you. If you want to be great, if you want to call yourself a leader, if you want to call yourself a person that really tries to do this, then the responsibility is yours. And I know you're thinking, well, why can't they do this? Well, they should, but someone has to get it started. And if you're here, if you're thinking, if you care enough about this issue to come to this webinar, then the responsibility is yours, and you should welcome that because you care, right? Overall, we just tend to be overconfident. This is one of my favorite pictures of overconfidence. In most all aspects of life, it's another psychological bias we work on. Now, not all of them. For instance, however creative you think you are, if you think you're a really creative person, you're probably right. Research shows that. If you think you're not a really creative person, you're probably right on that too. With creativity, we're right. Public speaking, you're probably better at it than you think. Most people are better at public speaking than they honestly believe. But with most things, we tend to be a lot more confident than we really should be. Our opinions, we judge them as facts, because if we believe them, that's enough for at least our subconscious to go with. And this gets back to the fundamental attribution error, which is basically when we make a mistake, we tend to blame it on other people. When other people make a mistake, we tend to blame it on those other people. We think other people should take responsibility for their mistakes. They should be able to admit that they're wrong, but we have a hard time doing that themselves. An experiment I do with a lot of my students, and I do this at both the undergrad and MBA levels, is I say, imagine somebody dropped out of college. Why do you think that happened? And they tend to say things like, well, because they didn't try hard enough, because they didn't go to class, because they slept in, because they weren't smart enough. And then with the same students, I'll ask them, well, imagine you had to drop out of college. And you know, honestly, the answers I get are, I had to quit so I could take care of my ailing grandmother. You know, I quit to join the Peace Corps. You can see the differences in how we view ourselves and others and our failures. So the main point I'm really trying to make here is that we are a lot more confident in our opinions than we should be. And I say this as someone who has seen the flaws in a lot of my political and moral opinions and has succeeded in actually changing my mind about some political and moral opinions by having really open conversations with people. So now you admit, you understand that you might be wrong. Okay, great. Why can't they admit that they might be wrong? Well, they should, they need to, but again, this goes back to something I said earlier. It's one person has to kick this off. Let me put it this way. Why are you here? Like, why did you decide to take an hour of your time and go to a webinar on talking to people who disagree with you? What's your goal out of this? So you want to have more of these conversations, but why? I'll tell you, it's one of two things, and it might be both. Either you want the truth to win out. Either you want to convince them of the truth, or you want to be convinced the truth. You want the truth to win. You want both of you to believe the thing that's true, or you want to demonstrate how much smarter you are. You want to make them feel bad. You want to make them feel dumb. You want them to realize how wrong they are and look up to you on your pillar in the sunshine and say, oh my goodness, I was so wrong. You're right. I'm sorry. I am on your side now. Now, if you're interested in the second one, if that's why you're here, I'm going to be honest with you, I can't help you too much on that. I'm here about the first one because the first one is the one that's based on truth and facts. And that's, I don't know, I'm a professor. I'm supposed to care about those sometimes, I think, usually in my teaching. I don't know. I hope my boss isn't on here. Anyway, hopefully you get what I'm after. You want the truth to win out, right? So let's play with that a little. What if you want the truth to win? What if the most important thing for you is the truth winning out? Then you should be shooting for one of three outcomes. If you're talking to someone who disagrees with you, either you're right, which means you need to be able to successfully persuade them, or they're right, which means you're making a mistake and they need to be able to successfully persuade you. Or the truth, and this is what's most often true, the truth is somewhere between the two viewpoints, in which case you each persuade each other. And the question I have to each of you, are you honestly comfortable, consciously and subconsciously, with all three of those outcomes? Like, are you okay with those? If you were to go into a conversation, would you be okay walking away with information that challenged your worldview, that made you rethink some of your positions? Now, I've had that happen to me a couple of times because I've really been studying this for a while, tried to be open-minded, and it's an eye-opening experience, really seeing things from different perspectives. And sometimes you take that and you're like, nope, I still believe what I do, and here's why. And sometimes you're like, no, I see a new facet to this. And boy, 2020 has been a great year for seeing new facets to things. Remember, a traitor is someone who quits your party to join the other one. But someone who quits the other party to join you is an enlightened convert. We have different ways of looking at these things, right? The smartest people in the world are full of doubts, and research shows this. Like the smartest, and you may have seen some research about this after some statements that were made by some of our politicians a couple of years ago. The smartest people in the world don't feel the need to brag about it, to prove it, to put others down, to say I'm right and you're wrong. Actually, the smartest people in the world are really characterized by the degree to which they're willing to accept that maybe they're wrong, their ideas, their theories, their hypotheses. So with all that in mind, let's really dig into this at last. How do I really talk to people who disagree with me about politics or morals? The first step is getting past our moral intuition, and that's actually maybe the most important step. And let me give you my favorite example of how this works with a meme that you've probably seen on social media. It's been circling for years. And have you seen this before? If not, take a good look at it. It separates equality from equity. I'm not sure. Equity is not. I feel like I need to say equity is not the scientific term for what you see on the right, but who cares? Let's go with it. You see this cartoon for equality and equity. These three people, gentlemen trying to watch a baseball game. On the left-hand side, one of them can barely see, one of them can't see. On the right-hand side, everyone can. And generally, most people's initial impression to this is a positive one. They're like, oh, that's nice. Now they can all see, now they can cheer. They've got what they need. That's cool. But if you really just stopped and you looked at this and thought about it, let's say like I locked you in a black room. There's nothing else in this room except this picture, and you just had to stare at it for 10 minutes. Would you still like it as much? And there are reasons to think that people wouldn't, and it doesn't matter your political persuasion. There are different reasons not to like it. And let me kind of walk you down some different paths that'll kind of illustrate this moral intuition thing I'm talking about. Take a look at this equity picture. Now, what if the man in blue said to you, why does he get 2 boxes and I get none? Is that fair? That's not fair. He's got 2 of them. He could share them and give 1 to me, but I've got 0. Now, what would you say to that? Because you could say, well, he needs them more than you. You don't need those boxes. But could you imagine another point of view where he says, well, yeah, I guess there is a fairness angle to this. That's interesting you say that. Has the man in purple done anything to deserve those 2 boxes? Maybe, maybe not. Does that even matter? Or does it matter more that he needs them? We're going to get into this. This is a fundamental difference in our moral intuition, but I hope you can understand both sides of that. You're going to hear me say this a lot. I hope you can understand the logic behind both sides, even if you don't necessarily agree with one of them, because that's the key to having these conversations. What if the man in red says, well, he gets 2 boxes, I get 1? Is that fair? I mean, I can just barely see. You can see I'm just like barely getting my chin over the fence here. I could see a lot better if I had the 2. Why does he get the 2 and I have 1? What moral justification is there for that? It's kind of the same thing. Well, is it just, well, he needs them more? Or, you know, is there something about deserving? And again, I don't care which side you agree with. Can you understand the logic both ways? Let's take it a step further. Let's say both the men in blue and the men in red said, you know what? We paid just as much as the man in purple. We worked just as hard as the man in purple. Our outputs, what we did, were just as good as the man in purple. What has he done to earn more boxes than us? What if the men in blue and red are angry? They're mad. They're saying, how come he gets boxes and I don't? He didn't do anything that we didn't do. If he deserves to have a box, we deserve to have a box too. Again, agree, disagree? Can you see the logic there? That's the important thing, even if you don't agree with what I just said, because I can guess, I would bet that if you're like most people, about half of you watching this do agree with what I just said and half of you don't. And I'm not going to tell you which way I feel. It doesn't matter. The key is, can you understand the opposite perspective? There's a lot about our political differences and our moral differences, because they're all tied together, that can actually go back to this example. One day I was reading a website, and what I really like to do, just to give me legitimacy when I do this, I really like to read websites on both sides of the political aisle. It's very eye-opening. It's very insightful. So one day I was on a left-wing website. If memory serves, it was, I think it was either the Huffington Post or the Nation. I mean, good, reputable news, but definitely with the left-wing slant, right? And they had their own version of this meme that I'd like to share with you. It started out the way what I just showed you. It's got the equality and it's got the equity. And then it went a little bit further and it said, well, here's what reality looks like, where the man in blue has got far, far, far more boxes than he could possibly need. And the man in purple is not just standing on 1 box. The man in purple is in a hole. I mean, you can barely see the bottom of the fence. But then they went on and said, you know, here's the way it should be. You know, here's the 4th version, what they called liberation. There is no fence. And the reasoning behind this, the moral reasoning behind this was, let's let everyone see. Why is there a fence in the first place? Why are we preventing people from seeing? What good does that do in the world? Why can't we just help the people, help them be happy, help them be part of this, help them make them feel better? And for the progressive, for the liberal, for someone more on the political left, ethics means, well, in this case, the moral thing to do is to just let everybody see. Why not? To do otherwise, that would be inhumane, that would be uncaring. Why are we putting up a fence to stop these 3 men from enjoying themselves? If we got rid of the fence, we wouldn't even need any crates. And that's because, as I'll go over in a bit, if you are on the progressive, the leftist end of the spectrum, you tend to look at morality from a care-harm perspective, solely, completely, exclusively. Who's being helped and who's being hurt? Now, after I read this, I thought, okay, this is really cool. I wonder if there's a conservative version. I wonder if there's a right-wing version or a Republican version. What would a Republican say when they saw this? And I had some guesses, but eventually I went looking on some right-wing websites, did some searches, and I found one. I think this was on the Weekly Standard, but I could be wrong. I don't remember exactly, but it was on another one. It was a publication like the ones I said before that you know reports the news, but it's definitely got a bit of a right-wing slant. And here's their version, basically, the true equality version. As you can see, the first 2 pictures are pretty similar. You've got your equality, you've got your equity, and then capitalism. And if you can't read that small print at the bottom, it says pay for your tickets, freeloaders. And usually people find that funny and I get a laugh out of that, but think about that for a second. So where the liberal side said get rid of the fence, the conservative side said build a new fence or build a bigger fence. And why? Is it because the conservatives want to hurt these three people? And that's what, if you're more on the liberal side, that's probably where your mind went, oh, no, they're being mean. They just want to hurt these people. Now, if you're more on the right-wing side, you probably understood that that's not what they're trying to get at. What they're trying to get at is, well, look at all those audience members out there. They had to pay for a ticket. And, baseball tickets, they're not cheap. They can be upwards of anywhere from $100 to $500 to $1,000. And the conservatives' point, the right-wing point here would be, well, that's not fair. Why should they get to see it for free when they didn't have to pay anything? Why should everyone else have to pay? And not these three gentlemen? Shouldn't they have to pay just like everyone else? And again, I don't care if you agree or disagree, but do you see the logic behind these two different approaches? For the conservative, ethics is more about personal responsibility. And I told you the research shows conservatives tend to be a little bit more responsible, just as Democrats tend to be a little more open-minded. So on the conservative side, ethics, the right thing, morally, politically, whatever, means that people get what they deserve, what they've earned. If everybody gets the same thing, even though some people didn't work for it, that's not fair. That would cheat the hard workers. And you could see echoes of this in arguments that have been around lately about forgiving student debt, where one side says, oh my goodness, student debt is crushing, we need to help these people. And the other side says, well, how is that fair to the people who did pay off their debts? So for the Republican, for the conservative, for someone on the right, and I should have said this at the beginning, and forgive me, I meant to say this at the beginning, I completely forgot. Most of the research I'm talking about is pre-Trump. So, and there's a lot of us who think that Trump has kind of scrambled a lot of stuff in terms of the typical political alignment. So keep that in mind. But for the classical Republican conservative, it's more about fairness and cheating. How is it fair that these three guys get to see the game when they didn't pay anything? They basically snuck in. That's cheating. And it's also about authority. They're breaking the rules. There are rules set up and rules exist for a reason, the conservative would say, and they're breaking those rules. So those three boxes at the bottom, and hopefully you can kind of see what I'm getting at in terms of understanding where the other person is coming to. They come from a great theory, an amazing book. I'm going to hold it up on the screen right now, called The Righteous Mind. Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. It's by Dr. Jonathan Haidt, who's a professor at NYU, and he came up with this broad theory that he tested over a number of studies, replicated, peer-reviewed, this stuff works, that say basically that we've got different foundations for our morality, and based on what we think is moral, that tends to determine where we fall in the political spectrum. He and his colleagues identified 6 things that your morality could be based on. And here's what I mean by that. When you think something is right or something is wrong, when you think something is good or something is evil, you compare it to a standard in your head. You assume that everybody else has the same standard and that your standard is the only one. We all do it, I do it, you do it. But there are really 6 different ones we could use. And these are just the ones they've found so far. One is that care harm that I talked about before. Does this help people or does it hurt people? If it hurts them, it's unethical. If it helps them, then that's something moral. Now, it could also be based on authority and subversion. Are you following the same rules as everyone else? Are you paying attention to the people who have been to our elected officials? And by the way, I've always noticed that this one, whether Republicans or Democrats subscribe to this, tends to depend on who's in power. So we tend to go back and forth on that one. Liberty and oppression, is this free? Are we getting to do the things we want to do? I mean, think of the people who refuse to wear a mask. Let's use masks for a second. This is a good example. If you're wearing a mask, if you're being, if you're putting this on, as you go out and everything, you might be thinking a lot about care and harm, and you might be thinking a lot about authority. If you refuse to wear a mask, those people, they're thinking a lot about liberty and oppression. And you could argue that there is a point to be made that should the government be able to tell us what to do? And I Again, I can see both sides of that argument. So liberty, freedom. It could be about loyalty versus betrayal. That could be your root of ethics. It could be about fairness. We just talked about that with the conservatives and cheating. Or it could be about sanctity and degradation. Now, fairness and cheating, that has a lot to do with responsibility. Sanctity and degradation, when Haidt and his colleagues talk about that, they're talking about things like, what's a good example? The sanctity of the human body, for instance. The higher you are in sanctity, the more averse you would probably be to things like prostitution, to drug use, things like that. You know, if you think the holy water in the Catholic Church is a very sacred thing, you might be high on this. If you come up with pranks having to do with holy water, you're probably a little bit low on this. What's moral to you? Think about that for a second. Look at these six. Which of these, and it doesn't have to be just one, but which of these determines in your head whether something is right and wrong? Because you could have something that is right by one or two of these standards, but wrong by the others. Or you can have something that's right by most of these standards, but wrong by just one of the others. And then is it really good or evil? I'm not getting into a relativist approach. I'm not saying there is no good or evil. I'm saying that the truth is we all have different ways. You know, we all weight these six differently, but we assume everybody else does and should weight them the same way we do. And we don't spend enough time thinking, where are they coming from? And as far as it goes with Democrats and Republicans, what we've been talking about, the research finds if care harm is the only thing that's important to you, you're blue. The more left-wing you are, the more democratic you are. That is your basis for morality. You don't give a damn about authority or loyalty. Sanctity is less important. Fairness is even less important compared to who's helped and who's hurt. And even liberty is less important than getting to the best outcomes for everyone involved. If you believe that, you're really likely to be a liberal, a Democrat. Whereas the research shows if you're a Republican, you are worried about care and harm, but it's not the only thing. It's important to you, but so are all the others. So the more you look at other things in here besides care and harm, the more likely you are to be a Republican, especially if you're looking at fairness and cheating, responsibility, loyalty versus betrayal. Those are two that are really, really strong with Republicans. And the point I'm trying to make here, which I hope you're getting, is that if you can figure out where someone is starting from, you can figure out what their moral basis is, why they've come to their moral decisions, you are in a much better position to convince them, to persuade them, to talk to them, to at least understand where they're coming from and not judge them as just stupid and evil. And, you know, this can go even further. Excuse me, you know, libertarians, Tea Party types, they tend to be very high in liberty and oppression. Folks who are more on the far left, on the socialist side, they are very much for care and harm. They're very much against authority and subversion. You can see the different things. But if you frame if you can figure out where the other that you want to talk to, the other with a different view, if you can figure out where they're coming from, this is the moral basis they're using to get there. This is how it's different from the moral basis I'm using to get there. All of a sudden, you can see things from their perspective. And if you can see things from their perspective, you can talk to them. And you can use that to either understand that maybe they're right, or you can use that to convince them that they're wrong. And again, I don't want to make this an argument for moral relativism. That's, you know, there are whole courses on that. That's not what I'm saying. And frankly, I will tell you this, I don't believe personally in moral relativism. Some of our greatest thinkers in the areas of morality and ethics have said, no, there's going to be some things that are just universally right and universally wrong. What I'm giving you, or what I'm trying to give you, is a tool to stop hating the people who disagree with you, because it's not helping you and it's not helping them. If you really want to get at the truth, you cannot get at the truth, whether that means persuading them or letting yourself be persuaded, by just hating them, by tuning them out. But we're motivated to hate them and tune them out because we don't understand how this could possibly be right, how this could possibly be moral, until we look at it from that perspective. What moral basis are they coming from? And as this cartoon illustrates, you know, just hating on them, putting nasty comments in the Facebook, you know, just telling them they're wrong and I'm not going to talk to you. I mean, that's not going to convince anybody. We seem to be subconsciously convinced it will, but it won't. And our moral intuitions totally get in the way. Let me give you an example of this. And this is a purely hypothetical situation that I completely made up. Let's say, hypothetically, it's 2018. And we've got someone who's not too well known. It's a respected member of the US political judicial community, got a reputation in the circles with the people who know him or her for being very smart, somewhat partisan, nominated for, let's say, an extremely important government position, could have a huge impact on the United States of America. Person looks like a shoo-in to get it until a woman from his past comes forward with just really terrible allegations of abuse, that he did horrible things to her years ago. Stuff that, if it's true, I mean, oh my goodness. This hypothetical woman has a very compelling story. But if you really dive into it, really there's only two pieces of evidence, although they're pretty good: her own testimony and many notes from conversations with therapists, in which she discussed it a long time ago. Does struggle to offer specific details, which in one case is a point against her. On the other side, I mean, it was a long time ago, so you'd think there would be a struggle to offer specific details. Now, this is a purely hypothetical situation. I just ask you, do you think this hypothetical gentleman is guilty or innocent? If you were the person in charge, if you were the person in power, would you say, let this gentleman have this very important hypothetical government position he was nominated for? Or would you say, no, he's out of contention altogether? Have you got that in your head? Have you got this hypothetical thing? Now, usually at this point, people say, well, this isn't a hypothetical. This happened, and you're absolutely right. It didn't make that up. Who is this? And they say, well, it's Brett Kavanaugh. And I say, no, what I just described was Keith Ellison, who was nominated for the chair of the Democratic Party. And the question I always ask right when I give this, now that I've said that I'm describing this guy and not Brett Kavanaugh, did your answer change? Or do you feel bad about your answer? Are you rethinking it? Do you think maybe you had the wrong answer? Because most of us, we do feel a little bit bad about our answer when it changes to the other party. It shouldn't. The facts should be the same no matter which one, but for most of us, that changes. You get a little feeling in the gut of your stomach like, ooh, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I'd gone the other way now that I know that. And if you had that feeling at all, then you could be vulnerable to these kinds of biases. Let me go a little bit deeper in this. Here's some evidence of what I'm saying. If we're looking at Democrats and Republicans, going back to the Kavanaugh trial, because I think that was a great illustration of this. At one point, 76% of Democrats were certain that Kavanaugh was guilty, and 76% of Republicans were certain that he was innocent, which, you'd think you wouldn't see that if it was just all based on the facts, right? But here's the scary part to me. Those numbers are pretty much identical to the percent that supported him or didn't support him before the allegations ever came out. So basically, if you supported him, you thought he was innocent. If you didn't support him, you thought he was guilty. We are not looking at the evidence. And I don't care which side you're on. That proves we are not making the evidence. In our minds, we justified it. Oh, he must be innocent, subconsciously, because I like him. Oh, he must be guilty, subconsciously, because I don't want him to be on the Supreme Court. And I would actually argue that we're seeing this play off again. I don't care. I'm not saying if either are guilty or innocent, but look at the Biden allegations that came out a while ago with Tara Reade. 70% of Democrats currently believe Joe Biden is innocent, and 73% of Republicans currently believe he's guilty. That shouldn't be possible, ladies and gentlemen. That shouldn't be possible. There should be a lot more of an even split, or we should be, on one side or the other. If the evidence is really bad, all of us should believe he's innocent. You see what I'm getting at? We are letting our political beliefs color our judgments, color our rationality, color our judgments of other things that are right and wrong. That's what makes this so hard, is that we are falling into these traps. I do it, you do it, everyone does it. We've got to step out of them. This is how it's supposed to work. If there's a morally questionable triggering event like what I was just talking about, you should have a moral judgment of that event. Okay, that is right or that is wrong, and that leads to your moral decision, right? Jonathan Haidt and his colleagues found that's not really how it works. Instead, we compare it with our moral intuition, meaning, do we want this to be moral or not? Does it benefit us? Does it benefit our side if it's right or wrong? And there's so many examples of that in politics today. That colors your moral judgment of the event, and that leads to the moral decision. So if you want to expose this, if you want to get at when am I doing this, why am I doing this, and helping others get past it, well, it gets back to this moral foundations theory and these 6. Can you figure out where you're coming from, why you're making the decisions you are? And then more importantly, for the topic of this conversation, can you figure out where others are coming from? Where do you come from? What are your blind spots? Can you help others find them? I talked about how I like to get news from different sources. And if you really, really want to reach across the aisle and talk to people, I can't recommend that enough. Now, it will piss you off. Pisses me off, right? You will see things that you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they wrote this schlock. This is fake news, so on and so forth. Doesn't matter what side. I hate these people. Do it anyway, because every now and then you're going to find some eye-opening things. that are either going to be, oh my goodness, I never realized that. I never thought of it that way. Or they're going to be, I don't agree with that point, but I can see how it would get people to the opposite point that I'm from. And if you're interested, a couple of really good resources for that. One that I use a lot and one that I just discovered. One is called realclearpolitics.com. It's just a news aggregator. It's got links to a lot of the political articles that came out that day from a variety of sites. And if they have a pro-abortion article, they're going to have an anti-abortion article. If they have a pro-Trump article, they're going to have an anti-Trump article right next to it. So you can really get both sides of the story. I love this website, and they've got a whole chain of websites, but that's realclearpolitics.com. Great resource if you just want to see what people on different sides of the aisle are thinking. And something I just actually found out about on our UB School of Management's website is that one of our alumni, and actually someone I coach, so it was really cool to see this, a UB graduate has set up an app called Electo. Take a look at it, or you can look at the feature story on the UB School of Management website that offers a nonpartisan look at exactly what our elected officials are supporting, what they're doing, how they're spending their time. If you really want to get a nonpartisan look at just here's the facts of what's going on without any of the spin, again, the app is called Electo, and you can find a big story about it. And the UB graduate who founded it, actually an immigrant to America, voting for the first time this year. Really cool story on the UB School of Management website. So what am I really trying to get at with all this? If you really want to talk to people, I'm going to give you advice from one of the founders of modern psychiatry. Brilliant guy. The guy who basically invented the modern caring therapy paradigm. This is a picture of Dr. Carl Rogers. And he said, I'm going to his seventh point, his seventh major thesis statement, that the best vantage point for understanding behavior is from the internal frame of reference of the individual. And here's a really, really clear guideline for talking to people who disagree with you. And I take this as it was paraphrased by Robert Greenleaf from a conversation with Dr. Carl Rogers. Before you argue any point at all, first, explain your understanding of the other person's position. And you do that, you keep trying to do that until the other person is satisfied with it. You're saying, here's what I hear you saying, here's your position. And you have to keep trying to say the other person's position until they say, yeah, that's it, you've nailed it. You can't do it in a way that badmouths them or that is sarcastic. You do it in a way that they're like, yep, that is what I'm saying. Then, of that position you've stated, you say, well, here's how much of that I agree with. I agree with this motivation. I agree with this step. You don't say anything about the parts you disagree with. You start by identifying and stating as much of that person's position as you can agree with. Because a lot of times I say this is someone who's done this, you will find that you agree with more than you thought you did. And then and only then state your own point of view. And as Greenleaf writes, the risk, most people are too small-minded to do this. Most people are too insecure, too narcissistic to do this, because the risk in this approach is that you might end up being persuaded just as likely as the other people could end up being persuaded. And if that thought is just terrible to you, if you can't bear the thought of you moving a little closer to the other person's, then then you can just shut out the world, close your eyes, blind out, don't step outside your bubble, don't talk to anybody who disagrees with you. But if you do that, Greenleaf wrote, don't blame the world if you hate it, because that's your fault. So what are the big takeaways here? We're all overconfident that we're right, and we do unjustly demonize people who disagree with us, especially over moral or political issues. Now, personally, I believe that there are some moral and political issues that deserve to be demonized. I mean, I'm saying, I believe this, that some of these people are justly demonized. And obviously there are some things like, white supremacy that I'm certainly not saying, well, let me understand your point of view. I mean, but not every political issue on one side of the spectrum is up there with, for instance, hurting innocent people or racism. Obviously, we're all overconfident that we're right. And so we tend to write off people who disagree with us as wrong or evil without considering how they came to their conclusions. That's my big challenge to you. If someone disagrees with you and you really want to talk to them, think to yourself, what chain of thought would they have had to go through to come to that conclusion that seems so foreign to me? And it's probably based on one of those moral bases that is not a huge one for you. But if we feel this way, this prevents us from communicating with them, understanding them, and there's no way we can persuade them if our starting point of the argument is you're wrong and you're evil. To lead effectively, I'm a leadership professor, so let me work this in. You have to truly listen. I believe that to be a good human being, to be a good citizen, you really need to listen to people. You need to listen to things you disagree with. To truly listen, you got to be willing to consider the other people's perspectives, even the possibility that you're wrong, or at least that the other person isn't as wrong as you would like to think they are. So you start by imagining how someone could come to the conclusion they did. Figure out what their perspective is, and that guidance from Dr. Rogers kind of gives you a blueprint to get there. You consider whether that perspective should frame you. I look at things from the care harm perspective, but if I look at it from fairness cheating, I can come to a whole different conclusion. I don't agree with it, but I see how they got there. That's a really important tool to have in your toolbox. And then you can use that perspective to persuade them. There's research that's found, and again, I'm going to be an equal opportunity offender here, that it is not terribly difficult to move someone to the right on abortion or to the left on environmental issues by framing your arguments in your debate around their moral foundation and not yours. And if you're debating, and this is something I haven't mentioned, but whenever we're talking, especially when we're having an argument, we stop listening and we start planning in our head, here's the next brilliant thing I'm gonna say, right? Don't do that. If you're debating, don't plan your rebuttal just while they're talking. You listen to what they're saying. I don't know about you, but I've had instances where I actually bust out with the rebuttal that I've been thinking of, I've been planning in my head, and they actually said something while I was planning it out that I missed that completely made my point irrelevant. So you can embarrass yourself that way. So there's not a magic pill, there's not a golden ticket, there's not a really easy solution, and it's not about just convincing them that we're right and they're wrong. It's about understanding how they got there. And by understanding how they got there, why they got there, seeing that, maybe, just maybe, a good person, a smart person could get to this if some of their priorities were a little different, if they looked at what is right and wrong a different way. If we can do that, we're capable of persuading others because we're capable of framing our arguments in their terms. And we're also capable of being persuaded ourselves, but at the very least, we're capable of respecting each other, having a respectful conversation, and maybe just doing a little something to lower the temperature in the country, which I don't know, personally, I don't think that's a bad thing, because how can we fix things if we can't work together? In the words of Abraham Lincoln, the house divided cannot stand. One more thing before I log off and take questions and let you go. I'm a researcher. I always do this at the end of my speeches. I just wanted to mention a couple of research requests to you. A chance for you or your organization to get involved in research we're doing here at the University of Buffalo, no charge. I'm not asking for any money or anything like that. But really quick, here in the Department of Organizational Behavior and Human Resources, we're looking to partner with organizations, nonprofits, businesses, whatever it is, on 2 streams of research right now. Looking to explore who makes the best leaders and looking to explore what, if anything, keeps minorities from feeling comfortable speaking up at work. Both of these pretty hot topics in 2020, right? No charge for getting involved with this for your organization. We just dive into these things together and we're able to give you evidence-backed prescriptions. Here's what you can look for in the best leaders right here. We have evidence that these are the things you look for in the people you promote or the people you hire. And then for the second one, here's things you can do to really help your diversity initiatives that maybe you missed. The goal of these is not to judge you, it's just to learn a little bit together. And I'd like to close just by saying, if you're interested in either of these, or if you have any questions about today's presentation, want to get the link to the book or anything like that, please feel free to send me an email right there. And Christy, I am 2 minutes late. I apologize, but I'm done.
You were fantastic, Jim. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this excellent presentation. I did want to let everyone know we did put the book link, righteousmind.com, in the chat, and also the link to the School of Management website for the Electo app. You can learn more about that. That's also in the chat. So make sure you click on those links and save those for future reference if you'd like to take a look at those. Jim did put his email up here if you have any questions you'd like to reach out to him afterwards. I did want to start with a question here today, Jim, that was submitted. The first question, is there any difference in having these type of discussions based on the topic? So for example, they said politics versus religion. Your thoughts?
Well, there's part of me that wants to say no, the same principles apply, right? There's another part of me that wants to say, are they really different? Like when you say religion, are we arguing my religion is better than yours? Then yes, that's a little bit different, right? Because as strongly as we feel about our political positions, we tend to feel even stronger about our faith. And I'm not a big fan of telling other people that something's wrong with their religion. But I think usually when we are arguing about religion, I mean, at least my experience, I could be wrong. Usually we're not arguing, well, this religion's better than the other. It's more, this religion should or shouldn't take this position. And it actually gets back to political issues. So you can use a lot of the same principles. And actually, you know, there have been studies that have looked at a lot of the world's major religions and have found similarly that they're based on different moral bases, just like that. So to some degree, yeah, I think it does work. I'm not going to get into which religion aligns with which moral basis because I'm not going to go there. But I think the same thing applies. Usually when we're arguing about religion, it's not necessarily that one's better than the other. It's that this religion should or shouldn't do this. You know, if someone says, well, that's what Scripture says, then, well, I mean, that's what Scripture says. That's a tenet of the religion that says that the religion is more interested in this moral foundation than a different one. And that's interesting knowledge that can help you approach it. So tentatively, yes. I hope that answer got at what the question taker was looking at. And by the way, just apologies, my chat, I can see the stuff from UB, but I can't see anything from the attendees. So yeah, if there are any questions, I rely on you, Christy.
Excellent, super. We have some comments that are coming in, so I want to just share those with you, Jim. Some thank you comments. You have really been like therapy for someone, really making them feel more relaxed and comfortable, lighthearted. So just these comments, I think, have been so beneficial to see the impact you're having, Jim. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
I'm getting a couch in my office. You're welcome to drop by.
Fantastic. Excellent. Those are all the questions, and like I said, the comments that are coming through today, and they continue to come through, Jim, so thank you. I did want to just point out Jim's email address again at the bottom of his slide. Feel free to reach out to him if you do have any more specific questions. I'd like to thank him on behalf of the entire Office of Alumni Engagement team and the UB School of Management for sharing your time, your knowledge, your expertise, your research. Thank you. We've had a couple of questions come through about the recording. We have recorded this. You all are going to receive a copy in your email within the next 24 hours. Keep an eye on that tomorrow to come through. We also have an archive library on our website where you can access any of our webinars. Jim has done, I want to say, three to four for us. So he has done some great presentations if you'd like to go through and see his last ones if you were unable to join us. In addition, save the date for next week's webinar, Wednesday, which will be part one of a two-part series titled Saving Alice, which will explain how multiple medical errors led to the tragic, untimely death of an elderly woman, and how by collaborating with physicians, pharmacists, and other healthcare providers, patients can help prevent medication harm. So we have some excellent faculty from the School of Pharmacy here who are going to be joining us next week. So more information on all of our upcoming webinars as well as our archive library can be found on our website. With that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim for any closing remarks.
Don't be a jerk, folks. It's so easy. You know, it's so easy to get caught up in what we believe is right and wrong, and we're right and they're wrong. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I think the media on both sides really wants that to happen as well, because it drives up their readership and their viewership. Be a thoughtful human being, right? And I don't care if you're religious or not. It doesn't matter what religion you are, but every major human perspective on philosophy, on morality, on religion, they come back to something: let's treat each other with dignity and let's be open-minded, right? And that's a big challenge these days, and it's hard to do. What I've tried to do is give you a few tools to help get you there, so consider it. And this is the hardest thing in the world. Just, you know, what if I'm wrong? Asking yourself that question, what if I'm wrong? But I'll tell you this, it's what the smartest people in the world ask themselves every day. If it's good enough for them, it's probably good enough for the rest of us, right? That's it, Kristen.
Thank you, Jim. It was some great words to leave us with as we enter this week ahead. So really appreciate you all joining us. Thanks again, Jim. Take care, stay well, and enjoy the rest of your day.